Good day, everyone. How are you doing? Are you now ready for our lesson? But before we proceed to our discussion, allow us to introduce ourselves. Hi, I am Marin Sabel B. de la Cruz, one of the reporters for today's discussion, together with Ken Agustin, Hiromi Andanar, and Ariane Dacula. So, we encourage everyone to calm your minds and body so that you can focus and understand the lesson for today. So now let us start. What is advocacy? Who among you are familiar with the term advocacy? Do you have any ideas what advocacy is? Can someone please share their ideas and or thoughts about advocacy? I will give you 1 minute to think about your answers.
For me, advocacy is empowerment because advocating something need courage to speak up to address the underlying problems within specific areas, and this is done through envisioning and supporting the ideas and plans for a better change. Also, it awakens individual to be aware on the problems of the society, and by that they will be encouraged to participate for the improvement and change of the society, because it's not only the society who will be benefited from it but also us citizens of the society.
Whenever I hear the word advocacy, I initially thought about campaigns, whether it is political, environmental, or social. Advocacy tends to be the cataclysm of change in society and even the world as a whole. A lot of people partake in advocacy for a myriad of reasons. Personally, I am fond of environmental advocacy because it seeks to make a difference in our environment, the nature that is worth fighting for.
Speaking truth to power. I have heard about advocacy for a couple of times now, and as I grew accustomed to its concept, I have finally realized its essence to our lives. So, advocacy is an act made by people with means, sources, and ability to help out people with little to no power in helping themselves with the struggles in life and issues. So, advocacies can include demand for multiple reasons. It can be for positive change, for defending mistreated people, for pleading progress and innovation, and most importantly, it can be of help or support with less fortunate individuals.
It is evident that most of you are familiar with the term advocacy, and I believe that it was already tackled back in junior high school. So, it is written in the slide that uh, advocacy is the act of pleading for, supporting, or recommending. Since most of you know advocacy, have you experienced supporting or promoting any particular events, such as organizations, groups, issues, and so on? And I think one of the best examples here is the advocacy of Black Lives Matter. Do you know about Black Lives Matter? It was promoted and supported by many people all around the world to advocate for black people. And because we all know up until now, white supremacy still exists. And also the racism, not just with black, but also for the Asian people, including us. And that will also lead us to the term advocate. It means that in the slide, advocate is first to support or recommend publicly, plead for or speak in favor of. Second is a person who upholds or defends a cause, or in short, supporter. And the third one is a person who intercedes on behalf of another. Uh, to advocate, it refers to those people that support, defend, or promote something with a purpose. Their purpose is to speak in support of something. So, in that statement, do you consider yourself as an advocate? And what do you think is the purpose of the people that support Black Lives Matter? And I think that their purpose is to eradicate the racism and promote fair treatment for the black people, and especially to stop the discrimination and violence that is inflicted on black communities. And in the end of the slide is that is what advocate is and advocacy. Now let us proceed to the next slide. Advocacy versus lobbying. We have two terms here, which are advocacy and lobbying. There's a distinction between advocacy and lobbying. We all know what advocacy means, but do any of you know what lobbying means? So, it says here that advocacy includes activities. And what are those possible activities? It can be campaigns, such as animal rights, planting more trees, and contraceptive access, racial justice, and many more. Meanwhile, when we say lobbying, it is related to politics. It happens when discussing current or proposed legislation with decision makers such as elected officials and staff or voters on ballot issues and recommending a vote for or against. While all lobbying is advocacy, not all advocacy is lobbying. We can say that advocacy is a broader topic and lobbying is specific. It could be that lobbying is a type of advocacy because its objective is to persuade anyone in the Congress whether to support or oppose a certain legislation. And that's the difference between advocacy and lobbying. Any questions before we proceed to the next slide? None? Okay. Why is advocacy important? Before we proceed to the next reporter, I want to ask this question. Why are we doing advocacy? Is there importance if we support or be the voice of a certain group or something? Why is advocacy important? I will give you at least 2 minutes to give me at least 3 examples of why is advocacy important and tell me why. So now the timer starts now.
Good day, my name is Chris Marnal M. Constantino, and for me, advocacy is important because first, it allows people to have their voices heard on issues that are relevant and important to them. Second, it gives people freedom to exercise their rights and improve their overall well-being. Third, it encourages others to take action by increasing their awareness of the problems in their environment or in the community they live in. And lastly, it can have an impact on the formulation of policies that promote justice, equality, and fairness. Thank you.
Advocacy is very crucial in a lot of aspects of our lives. Take women's suffrage as an example. If not for a group of brave women, we wouldn't have the right to vote. We'll be forced to live a life hopelessly anchored into a system that doesn't favor women and minorities. Next example is the LGBT rights. Regardless of our sexual orientation and identity, we deserve to love someone and be who we are without being executed. Last example is the Amnesty International Philippines. They fight for human rights in the country. They seek to influence the adoption of reproductive health policies, abolition of death penalty, and so on. That's all.
Now that you have stated all your answers, I am impressed with the examples you have given. And that shows how eager we are to do advocacies and to help others with the use of advocacy. I have here 3 reasons why we conduct advocacy. First is to raise awareness. Oftentimes, there are so many issues around us that we are unaware of. That's why we do advocacy, for us to be informed of the issues that's happening in our society. Second one is to influence and change policies. In reality, there are policies implemented that are only exclusive to minority or certain groups, and that doesn't benefit all of them. We have to take action to address the conflict about the existing policies. So in order to do that, we have to advocate or promote change for the fair treatment for the better opportunities and needs of everyone. Lastly is to present individuals who may not be able to speak for themselves. This doesn't only apply to disabled people, but for the people who cannot express themselves alone. Through advocating, it helps to help someone. It helps to have someone else who can speak on your behalf and represent your interests, especially in formal situations or when you don't feel very confident. And that would be all for my part. I am now inviting Mr. Agustin to further discuss the importance of advocacy. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introductory information, Ms. Marian. Now let us move on to the importance of youth advocates. But first, what are youth advocates? Youth advocates are either administrated by someone or a group of young people. Now, what is the importance and the focuses of youth advocates? First, interaction with policymakers. The youth are able to share and express their personal experiences with policymakers. Second, contributing valuable insights into systems and policies. The youth are able to provide valuable insights into systems and policies that affects them directly. And lastly, policies that include youth input are shown to be more effective. Now let us move on to the qualities of an effective advocate. These basic qualities are good listening skills, patience, knowledge about the issue, articulate ability to move people, flexible, organized, and most of all, positive. And now, similar to the branches of law in our country, there are types of advocacy. There are 4 main types of advocacy, and the first one is legislative advocacy, which is the specific activity of working for the creation and the adoptions of right-specific legislations or changes to existing legislations. Number 2, we have judicial advocacy, which is the direct representation of an individual or group of people in a judicial proceeding. Number 3, administrative advocacy or the executive branch, examples of which are the president, city mayors, and state governors. And lastly, number 4, grassroots advocacy. It is also known as the power in numbers, or in unity there is strength. It is a building of a movement or of stakeholders to influence the policymakers, such as rallying.
Good day to everyone. I am Hiromi and I am one of your reporters for today. Before we talk about administrative advocacy, let's have a brief review about what is an advocacy. As mentioned earlier, it is an act of giving voice to the people in the society, raising up on issues that are important to be heard. Now, what about administrative advocacy, and why do we need an understanding about it? Administrative advocacy are the executive branch, and this executive branch includes the President of the Philippines, state governors, and city mayors. So, what about it? So, as you see, it is an advocacy that influences the governmental policy making that doesn't require a change in law. So if there are any individuals or group that influences how the existing laws are implemented, they are engaging in an advocacy. And to further explain what Ms. Marian said earlier, the lobbying is a nearly similar motive to administrative advocacy, but the administrative advocacy is focused more on educating people or the government to a certain issue, while lobbying is focused in influencing decisions. In a more simpler explanation, lobbying required involvement in legislative body, while administrative advocacy doesn't require legislative action. I know some of you may ask, what about it? And what is its importance? Well, so am I. But as a reporter for today's topic, I have searched some information regarding its importance. Number one is that administrative advocacy are used to improve access to public benefits. Number two is that these nonprofits have made government agencies to improve their regulations and policies for its employees, because this administrative advocacy protects and promotes rights of the public. Now let's move on to legislative advocacy. Legislative advocacy answers the question, how does an idea become law? So you see, legislative advocacy is an advocacy that has a relation to the legislative process. And this is what I have mentioned earlier, the lobbying. Lobbying is another term for legislative advocacy because it changes the existing legislation. And direct lobbying is the most common form of legislative advocacy. This direct lobbying includes series of steps, namely, meeting with elected officials, talking about a particular issue you are working on, and making them vote in your favor. This type of advocacy is effective to cause a change in government policies. Its main purpose is to work with decision makers to help them create or propose a bill that will help your organization and supporters, or to stop a bill that would harm them.
In the judicial advocacy, when the legislature fails to make the necessary legislation to suit the changing times and governmental agencies fail miserably to perform their administrative functions, sincerely, it leads to an erosion of the confidence of the citizens in the constitutional values and democracy. Political and economic movements are often supported by a network of individuals at the local level working to enact change. And this is where grassroots advocacy enters. Grassroots advocacy centers on people contacting their elected officials and reaching out to the public regarding important policy issues.
Now, let's talk about how we can create an advocacy plan. We have 5 steps to consider on creating an advocacy plan. For step 1, we should know what is the topic, whom does this topic affect, what's the scale of this topic, for example, local, national, or community. For step 2, what are the changes you hope to achieve? For example, one organization aims for the better salary and or benefits of the employees in a certain company. Or for some, their intended goal is to reduce pollution of the local waterways. What about you? Do you have some advocacy of certain issues you care about that you think you may provide some goals, or you can propose an idea of goals related to the issue? But always keep in mind that in setting goals, you need to consider to what kind of goals you want to happen in your plan, whether it is a long-term goal, short-term goal, or intermediate goal. For step 3, you should know what are the stories of the affected individuals of the said issue. What are the facts, statistics, and anecdotes that are needed for this work? Step 4, which agency or governing body has the authority to help you change and provide the funding and support you are seeking? Advocates must understand both the policy and political context. It is important to know not only who the decision makers are, but also when and on what basis decisions are made. Step 5, how would you create a strong and effective messages that will convince decision makers? But remember, no matter who the target audience is, always anticipate the point of views of the opponents and understand how to communicate in a way that will build bridges and identify common ground.
Before I start, allow me to introduce myself first. I am Arya Nicole Idahula and I am one of the reporters for today. My topic is all about the advocacy tools and strategies. First, we have here social media. Social media helps amplify advocacy efforts by potentially reaching more people. And to use social media effectively, you should have a clear plan in mind of who your audience is, which social media platforms are more suited to that audience, and what results you hope to gain from your efforts. Next, we have videos. Videos are beneficial for advocacy campaigns because they are a simple and efficient way to convey the main points of an idea or project to many people. Next, we have images. Images are best used with audiences to which you are giving face-to-face presentations, when they can be projected and the context can be explained. Images can be very convincing to any audience, but it will work particularly well with people who may not have the time or will to read content. Different types of images will appeal to different target groups. Photographs will work well with any audience, but scientific graphs may require some technical understanding to interpret properly. And documents. Documents can offer an opportunity to relevant facts, arguments, and images to be delivered, and even a whole concept in a well-constructed document. Lastly, we have presentation. Presentation can be very useful in presenting messages which have accompanying evidence in numbers, images. Graphs, photos, and etc. can be presented as part of your message through this type of format. Often, citizens and their organizations use a combination of different strategies to achieve their advocacy tools. Strategic communication is essential to any effective campaign. And now, let's talk about some advocacy strategies. The first strategy is creating identity through collective slogans, campaign logo, common objectives, and advocacy demands. The identity is what people think and feel about the advocacy campaign and the core issue it deals with. In the commercial sector, this would be equivalent to the brand. Branding matters for advocacy purposes because if there is a strong identity that is communicated in a clear and consistent manner, it can be more effective in advancing the advocacy goal. Gradually, the public, government bodies, and other organizations will recognize the campaign, which in turn will enhance its reputation. Identity is communicated in different ways and generally includes a name, logo, and messaging or slogan. Slogans are messages that people can identify with and understand. A slogan or tagline is the catchphrase or group of words that are put together to identify a cause or issue. It could be a one-sentence slogan. Example is, brevity is the key to memorability. And on the other hand, messages should be persuasive and crisp statements about the advocacy issue. Lastly, logos and symbols help sustain movements and campaigns. For example, the red ribbon and the white ribbon logos are instrumental in spreading awareness about HIV and AIDS, and as well as eliminating violence against women. The second strategy is bringing in charismatic advocacy champions. Usually, they are high-profile and eminent individuals who adopt an issue and publicly advocate for it. Usually, such individuals are highly driven and are passionate for the cause and exhibit a high degree of solidarity rooted in a shared set of beliefs, values, and visions. These advocacy champions or opinion leaders are those persons whose statements are influential with the media, decision makers, and the public. Because reporters are more likely to quote such eminent persons in covering a story than ordinary citizens. For example, the Natural Resources Defense Council, or a US-based nonprofit international environmental advocacy group, relies upon well-known figures like environmentalist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and actors Robert Redford or Leonardo DiCaprio as spokespersons. Third strategy is disrupting and creating awareness by demonstrations, nonviolent protests, and public disobedience. These are forms of public expression or community presence that have been used by various advocacy movements, such as the anti-slavery movement that brought about legislation to end slavery in the 19th century, and the trade union movement, which led to achieving basic labor rights and improved working conditions. There are different forms of nonviolent protest that include demonstrations, rallies, marches, vigils, sit-ins, hunger strikes, and other forms of mass meetings. They all aim to achieve goals such as social change while being nonviolent. This type of action highlights the desires of a group of people that feels that something needs to change to provide or to improve the current condition. They help in publicizing issues, getting attention so that other people become aware and support the cause. Stage 4 is advocacy and awareness events. Advocacy and awareness events are gathering of core mission representatives to raise awareness for the cause. They assist in networking a range of stakeholders to discuss a variety of views and lead to new ideas, tactics, and goals. There are various kinds of advocacy events that can be held, and one of them is conferences. A conference is a gathering of people with common interests or background, with the purposes of allowing them to meet one another and to learn about and discuss issues, ideas, and work that focus on a topic of mutual concern. Another way of galvanizing people for the cause is to organize public meetings, or town hall meetings or public hearings. This will help to get your message out, galvanize support for your campaign, and hold decision makers to account. It is advised to invite those who are directly affected by the issues, the wider community, service providers, and representatives of concerned government departments and your local representatives. The last strategy is mobilizing a network of activists and organizations. A network is often seen as a loose association of people or groups brought together by a common interest. A network usually has a set of organizations with diverse strengths and relationships and trust between them. On the other hand, an advocacy network is a group of individuals and organizations working together with a common goal of achieving changes in policies, laws, or programs for advocacy issues. In short, or in easier explanation, a network consists of multiple actors with multiple objectives. Now, we can say that advocacy in many cases entails building a platform by which to become a mouthpiece for those whose voices have been muted and have those voices heard relative to the issues that are oppressing them or further devaluing them as a whole. Advocacy is also about establishing resources specific to the needs of those that are forced to live on the fringe of society. Therefore, the ability to coordinate, orchestrate, facilitate, and administrate relative to availing people in need of service to providers is paramount to the successful advocate's journey. And that's all for our report. Thank you.